There are many ways to study for an exam, depending on factors such as how much time you have and the type of material you are studying. In this video, I will share with you 5 steps to help you best prepare for an exam. Step 1. Gather all your resources, including any sample exams, instructor handouts, and in particular, complete and comprehensive notes. Most, if not all, exam questions will come from only 2 sources: what was covered in class and what was covered in the readings. So understand that preparing for an exam actually begins on day 1 of note-taking. Step 2. Figure out which topics you know the least well. Do this by testing yourself. For example, answer questions provided by your textbook or an exam review guide if you have one. Or if you've been using the Cornell method of note-taking in the way that we suggested in our note-taking in class video, use the questions in the Q section to test your knowledge. Or if you have an outline of key concepts, lecture to yourself, noting which topics you don't know much about. Step 3. Note the date of the exam and figure out how much time you have for studying. Keeping this time constraint in mind, do the next step, which is Step 4. Come up with a game plan of what you will study and when, being sure to add in time right before the exam to do a large review. For example, if you had 3 days to study, which topics do you need to cover per day? Take care to allot more time for the topics you know the least, and be aware that you may need to modify your plan once you start studying. Step 5. Use evidence-based study strategies. For topics you know little to none about, some rereading may be necessary in order to relearn these topics. However, the vast majority of your time should be spent using other study strategies. The reason for this is that research has found rereading to be one of the least effective methods when it comes to learning. Rereading gives rise to what a Mind for Numbers author Barbara Oakley refers to as an illusion of competence, meaning it makes you feel like you really know the material when in actuality you don't. At best, you might be able to memorize just enough to get by on your exam, but you won't remember the material a few weeks or months later. So don't reread as your predominant way of studying. Instead, do the following. Practice retrieval of long-term memories. Space out your practices. And interleave your practices using varied problems. For more information about these effective study strategies, including how to implement them, check out the Evidence-Based Study Strategies video. Now, a few more words of advice before we part. Keep in mind that the more time and effort you spend on doing the study strategies just mentioned, the easier they will become to use and the greater your learning will be. Use the study steps I shared as frequently as you can, not just a few days before an exam. Imagine how much less stressed you'd feel before an exam if you had followed these steps once a week. Even if you followed this plan just at the halfway point between your last exam and the next exam, studying for the next exam is bound to feel easier. Finally, create optimal brain conditions. Be sure to sleep, exercise, eat, and drink well, as doing so creates a physical environment which allows the brain to function at its best. In his book, Spark, Dr. John Ratey of Harvard Medical School recommends in particular aerobic exercise combined with mental challenge to boost the brain's ability to learn. Examples include playing tennis or doing yoga after warming up with a jog. In terms of eating well, aside from reminding us that glucose is the brain's main fuel, Dr. Adam Persky of UNC's Pharmacy School tells us that 25 to 50 grams of glucose can produce measurable increases in some aspects of memory. Perhaps it would be a good idea then to eat a cereal bar right before an exam. Dr. Persky also advises us to stay well hydrated as dehydration interferes with thinking. He further cautions us not to use our thirst as a guide for hydration, as our ability to think is already compromised by the time our thirst mechanism kicks in. Instead, he suggests regular intake of fluids. To learn what we recommend in terms of sleep, check out the sleep video. For more information about study strategies, including additional tips as well as the research and logic underlying the tips, check out the relevant and recommended resources at the end of this video. You may also want to consider taking the Science of Learning course offered by the School of Education, or talk with an academic coach at the Learning Center to help integrate these tips into your study practice.